This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Atelia Edwards. Tonight's top stories. The US and Japan have sealed a new partnership, calling it a golden age in their alliance, signing deals on trade, security, and key minerals to curb reliance on China. Well, Beijing also making its own outreach, with China upgrading its free trade pact with ASEAN for a new era of cooperation, covering digital, trade, and sustainable development. President Putin says Russia's partnership with North Korea is going to plan after talks in Moscow with Pyongyang's foreign minister on closer cooperation. Now, the man accused of killing Japan's former leader Shizo Abe has pleaded guilty 3 years on, blaming Abe's church links. A verdict is due in January. And in business, HSBC raises its profitability outlook for 2025 despite a 14% drop in third quarter profit. A high-stakes week ahead in South Korea that may see a meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping at the APEC summit. Senior correspondent Lim Yeon-sok is in host city Gyeongju to tell us what to expect. The leader of the US and Japan cementing ties after Donald Trump and Sanae Takaichi locked in an agreement to promote economic security and growth. Both sides are heralding a golden age of their alliance. Mr. Trump and Ms. Takaichi also signed a second deal on rare earth supplies that's crucial for high-tech products, ranging from cell phones to military weapons, as Washington and Tokyo seek to wean themselves from China's chokehold on the critical minerals and related components. And both leaders later headed to the Yokosuka Naval Base south of Tokyo, where they reaffirmed ties and the importance of regional security. Mr. Trump and Ms. Takaichi taking turns to speak to a personnel on board the USS George Washington aircraft carrier.
The cherished alliance between the United States and Japan is one of the most remarkable relationships in the entire world. Really, there's never been anything like it. Born out of the ashes of a terrible war, our bond has grown over 8 decades into the beautiful friendship that we have. It's a foundation of peace and security.
今ここに再び日米の最高指揮官が並び立ったこの機会に、私はその決意を引き継ぎ、インド太平洋を自由で開かれたものとし、そして地域の平和と繁栄の礎とする決意を新たにしました。
China, commenting on the summit between Mr. Trump and Ms. Takaichi, stresses that the growing US-Japan ties should contribute to peace and stability in the region. Now, Beijing also urged Tokyo to respect the security concerns of its neighbors. Well, for more analysis, we are joined by Jesper Cole, global ambassador from Monix Group. Well, thanks, Jesper, for joining us this evening. This all-out effort from Prime Minister Takaichi to woo Trump. I'm curious to know which parts of her outreach impressed you and which didn't.
Look, the key point is, this is Takaichi's grand entry onto the global stage. Incredible professionalism. She clearly knows what she's doing. She knows how to flatter President Trump and to drive home the key messages. Number one, Japan is the unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States of America here in Asia. And number two, Japan has got what it takes to help America reindustrialize and rebuild its infrastructure. So from that perspective, it's really 10 out of 10 for Takaichi and Trump.
Okay, the big money question. Let's talk about the economics behind all that pageantry. Jesper, help us read this. Japan's paying tariffs and also pouring $500 million into the U.S. economy. Is this actually a smart, long game for Japan?
Look, Japan, needs the partnership with the United States. I mean, just in the money world, in the investment world, please remember that about 1/3 of all of Japan's profits are actually generated by exporting or selling to the United States of America. So there's a very, very high interdependence. And, now that America demands, an entry price to participate in the American economy via the tariffs, via the investment deals. Yes, Japan is working very, very hard to turn this into a win-win situation for Japan.
So, Jesper, on the trade front, one of the most talked about outcomes was this new minerals deal, which is framed as a push to, sort of wean reliance off China. So, Jesper, is there any real teeth in that? And what sort of measurable outcomes of this pact should we be looking out for?
I think this pact is more symbolic, really trying to add another dimension to the US-Japan relationship in terms of the overall economic impact, to get to Japan's rare earth, holdings, you have to dig very deep into the sea. That requires a lot of technology development. So I think it's more symbolic on the rare earth rather than actual substantive.
Right. Back home, Takaichi's political footing, some say, sort of remains shaky. Given her position in Parliament, this summit does come at a crucial time. How effective do you think this whole high-profile U.S. visit is when it comes to being a domestic political stabilizer?
Look, it's funny that people think that her political foundation is shaky. I mean, she's just scored the highest popularity and support rates in the history of Japan for a new prime minister coming in. Popularity ratings of higher than 75%. So I think, that you actually will be positively surprised by how well Takaichi is received amongst the people. Because remember, the Japanese people want somebody who actually takes actions. They don't want the old boys network of the LDP to continue its little, thing. They want decisions to be made. They love the fact that Prime Minister Takaichi is a fighter who does not come from a rich and old established political family, but is actually a self-made woman.
On a more personal note, though, I mean, her gestures does carry heavy symbolism because, we know that she gifted Mr. Trump, the late Shizo Abe's golf putter, for instance. Do you see any trade-off here in terms of how Takaichi, how she's leaning in quite heavily on Abe's legacy to connect with Trump?
Look, it's the right thing to do. But one, Takaichi's mentor, was the late Prime Minister Abe. She inherits not just a huge amount of admiration, but also a lot of his team.
Jesper, I'm afraid we have lost a connection with Jesper there, but we were just talking to Jesper Cole, Global Ambassador for Monex Group, on Trump's meeting with Takaichi. Moving on to other news, China and ASEAN have upgraded their free trade agreement on the sidelines of the bloc's summit in Kuala Lumpur. The latest pact covers digital economy, green development, and supply chain resilience. The Chinese Premier Li Qiang witnessed the signing with his Malaysian counterpart, Anwar Ibrahim. The 11-member bloc is China's largest trading partner, with exchanges valued at almost $800 billion last year. And the deal comes as China and ASEAN members continue to grapple with Donald Trump's tariffs. Mr. Anwar says the bloc seeks friendly relations with all countries, while Li Qiang stresses China's close ties with the region, denouncing Mr. Trump's levies at the same time. Now, U.S.-China trade tensions rekindled earlier this month after Beijing announced new curbs on rare earth exports. And CNA's senior correspondent, Afifa Arifin, in Kuala Lumpur. We also have China correspondent Deborah Wong in Shenzhen joining us live. First to you, Afifa, tell us more about this expanded trade pact between ASEAN and China. What does it tell us about the bloc's strategy?
Well, I'll tell you, with the signing of this upgraded free trade agreement 2.0, it reflects ASEAN's shift towards a broader agenda. So this isn't anymore about lowering tariffs. It reflects, or it signals ASEAN's economy's capacity to tap into the Chinese market, to explore new opportunities across various industries like green technology, for example. And so for ASEAN member states, the key question is how effectively can local firms, especially SMEs, capitalize on these new gains. But there's also a broader strategic dimension to China deepening engagement or deepening its economic architecture here in Southeast Asia amid US tariffs on regional exports. But the timing of the signing of this agreement is also significant because it comes 2 days after US President Donald Trump arrived here in Kuala Lumpur to attend the ASEAN summit. It really reinforced America's commitment and engagement in Southeast Asia. We saw how Washington had signed bilateral trade deals in critical minerals with Malaysia, with Cambodia, with Thailand. And so that's a key thing. The ASEAN is going to face many fresh questions on balance, on agency, on diversification, especially in light of the increasingly competitive global economic landscape. And this was something that was highlighted by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim earlier today. He talked about how, on Sunday, ASEAN had welcomed Donald Trump, and today it sits with China. He reinforced that this is a show of ASEAN centrality, neutrality, and how ASEAN as a regional bloc is prioritizing both sides. So let's listen in to what else he said at the signing of that upgraded trade pact this morning.
Views is neither possible or nor desirable, but I believe this appreciation for China's consistent and constructive engagement is shared by all. Now we have seen and witnessed the ACFTA 3.0 upgrade protocol, which marks an important step in our economic cooperation.
Well, let's bring Deborah into the conversation now. Debs, this trade deal, why is it so important to China? And I guess, how does it impact its position as a global superpower?
I think to understand that, we first have to take a look at the kind of impact that the US-China trade relationship has on the rest of the world. So the ongoing trade tensions right now, that's causing a massive destabilization to global supply chains. We're also looking at a socio-political divide. And, even with the upcoming leaders meeting, Trump and Xi expected to meet in South Korea and APEC later this week, there is still some sense that the ASEAN market offers more reliability, offers more stability. In fact, I spoke with a logistics company in Shenzhen earlier this morning, and he told me that ever since the US tariffs kicked into high gear at the start of this year, many of its clients actually rerouted their goods to Southeast Asia from the US. And, even if the relationship with the US does improve in the future, there is, a sense that they will still, try to steer clear from the US market for a little bit longer until they can be convinced that there's more certainty. In fact, the upgraded free trade agreement that we saw this morning does provide a ground for better data flows, improved supply chain connectivity, as well as a more integrated digital economy. So at least for the logistics provider, he's more confident, he's more hopeful, in fact, that the free trade agreement will allow the bulk of his orders to be processed quicker. Let's hear more from Chinese Premier Li Xiang, who made some remarks at the signing today.
形势严峻，我们越应当更加坚定地团结自强，在相互依重、协调行动当中，捍卫我们自身正当权益，在互通有无、深化合作当中，促进经济稳健增长。
I think one thing that stood out in Li Qiang's remarks was the mention of mutual reliance between China and ASEAN. So it's very clear here that China needs ASEAN as much as the region needs China. After all, Southeast Asia remains the largest export destination for Chinese goods. And that corridor needs to remain not just open, but even wider, because if China were to hit its growth target of around 5%, they do need to tap on the ASEAN market. As it stands, China's domestic economy is still recovering from the pandemic, and consumption trends are still far from ideal. And so open and reliable trade ties with ASEAN will allow China to mitigate risk and as well as to remain a major competitive economy. I'll tell you.
Hey, thanks for helping make sense of this for us. China correspondent Deborah Wong in Shenzhen, as well as CNA senior correspondent Afifa Arifin in Kuala Lumpur. Now, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is urging ASEAN and China to move quickly on their upgraded trade deal so that their businesses and people can start to benefit. CNA's Aslam Shah with the details.
At the ASEAN-China summit in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong urges both sides to move fast on the newly signed Free Trade Area 3.0 agreement. He said the deal will cut trade barriers, improve supply chains, and open the door for collaboration in future industries like the digital economy and green technology. In the room was Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who Mr. Wong said has shown commitment to engage closely with this region. Mr. Wong also called for better flight connections and smoother data flows to support digital trade. He also welcomed China's support for the ASEAN Power Grid, which will strengthen energy security and expand renewable energy cooperation across the region. Singapore, he added, will continue to partner China on sustainability through training and development programs. Mr. Wong said these efforts will help ASEAN and China build trust and stability. He added that progress on a code of conduct in the South China Sea is vital to ensure peace, safety and freedom of navigation. Aslam Shah, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, South Korea's economy clocks its fastest growth rate in more than a year. Plus, Japan unveils a list of potential projects for its $550 billion investment package agreed under its tariff deal with Washington. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is time for your business news with Roland Lim. So, Roland, let's talk about the global banking giant HSBC. Their report card is out today. How did they do?
Well, not good, I'm afraid. Net profit hit by a massive provision made related to a lawsuit as well as a tax case. And management is also warning against more turbulence from the private credit markets. HSBC's third quarter earnings sliding after taking a hit from an unexpected $1.1 billion charge tied to the Bernard Madoff Ponzi scheme. The case, of course, is the biggest ever such fraud in history. Pre-tax profit dropped 14% on year to $7.3 billion for the quarter ending September. Revenue beat market expectations, coming in at about $18 billion. Despite the dip, HSBC has upgraded its earnings forecast for the year. It expects $43 billion in net interest income in 2025, and that's up from $42 billion estimated in June. The bank said that it's optimistic about policy rates in key markets like Hong Kong and Britain. But it also warned that commercial real estate conditions remains challenging in China. HSBC's third quarter results comes a day after a Luxembourg court ruling on a case linked to the Madoff investment fraud. The lawsuit, filed in 2009 by Herald Fund SPC, sought recovery of assets lost in the scheme. The court rejected HSBC's appeal on part of the claim, leading the bank to record a $1.1 billion provision. HSBC said it will file another appeal, and if that fails, the bank will contest the final amount later. In Hong Kong, HSBC shares climbing 4.4% for the day, and in early trade in London, while shares are up nearly 3%. South Korea's economy picked up speed in the third quarter, powered by strong consumer spending, government stimulus, and solid export demand. Asia's fourth biggest economy expanded a seasonally adjusted 1.2% on quarter in the 3 months to September, beating market forecasts. Now, on an annual basis, GDP grew 1.7%. Exports, a key growth driver, jumped more than 12% on year in September, despite the pressure from a 15% U.S. tariff. Now, it's the fastest pace in over a year, thanks largely to surging global demand for AI-related chips. On the domestic front, the government's $22 billion supplementary budget rolled out in early July helped cushion households and to boost spending. And South Korean shares taking a pause after hitting record highs as traders await earnings report this week from major firms, including SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics. The benchmark Kospi index ending the day lower by 0.8%. The Korean won also weaker against the greenback at 1,435.29, changing hands with $1. Japan has unveiled a list of potential projects for its $550 billion investment vehicle in the U.S., a centerpiece of the new trade deal that saw Washington ease tariffs on Japanese goods. Tokyo's trade minister released names of Japanese companies keen to launch projects across sectors like energy, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. Among them are SoftBank Group, Westinghouse, and Toshiba. The proposed investments range from $350 million to as much as $100 billion. The U.S. will make the final call on which projects are approved, though Japan will still have a say. Still, President Trump retains the power to restore higher tariffs if Tokyo fails to fund the projects that he backs. The announcement followed a show of unity between Mr. Trump and Japan's new Prime Minister, PM Takaichi. The two leaders signed new agreements on trade and critical minerals, with Mr. Trump thanking Japan for making big investments into the U.S.
We've made Japan a lot of money, that's okay, but they're a big investor in our country, and we like that. And I was just told by the Prime Minister that Toyota is going to be putting auto plants all over the United States to the tune of over $10 billion.
Taiwan's Foxconn expanding its foray into artificial intelligence with an investment plan worth nearly $1.4 billion. The world's largest contract manufacturer is looking to procure equipment for an AI compute cluster and a supercomputer center. Foxconn says it's aiming to expand its cloud computing service platform and to accelerate development of its 3 smart platforms. It'll be using its own funds to finance the investments slated to begin from December this year to December next year. The firm did not specify where it will be made, but reports say it could be Taiwan. Foxconn has been stepping up investments in AI and cloud infrastructure in a bid to diversify its growth beyond smartphones. Now, back in May, it teamed up with NVIDIA to build an AI center in Taiwan that is targeted to have 100 megawatts of power. Then, in August, the company announced plans with Japan's SoftBank to manufacture data center equipment in Ohio. That's part of the Stargate project to boost U.S. AI infrastructure. Amazon says it'll reduce its corporate workforce by about 14,000 roles as the tech giant cuts down on operational layers to limit costs amid ballooning investments in artificial intelligence. The world's 5th most valuable company by market capitalization is America's 2nd biggest private employer, with about 1.5 million total employees. The company had about 1.56 million full-time and part-time employees as at the end of last year. Now, Amazon's corporate workforce includes roughly 350,000 employees. Amazon has been restructuring its workforce across multiple divisions in recent months, with piecemeal job cuts across its books, devices, and services unit, as well as its Wondery podcast division. CEO Andy Jassy said in June growing adoption of generative AI tools would reduce total corporate workforce at the e-commerce giant the next few years. The tech industry has continued to shed jobs this year as businesses embrace AI and automation. Now, just last month, Meta slashed 600 jobs to streamline its AI unit, while Google, it laid off more than 100 employees in design-related roles. Microsoft has held several rounds of layoffs this year to rein in costs. It cut 9,000 jobs in July following a reduction of 6,000 staff in May. Amazon and its peers in the Magnificent Seven group are set to post earnings this week. All companies enjoying gains in trading overnight ahead of their financial results. And that will do it for business. Telly.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Well, we are going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, our senior correspondent Lim Yon-suk will be joining us to help break down a crucial week ahead in South Korea that may see a face-to-face meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. Plus,
we do look actually with great sorrow at the growing relationship between Russia and China. Because essentially,
Finland's foreign minister weighs in on Beijing's ties with Moscow and its impact on the war in Ukraine. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. The leaders of US and Japan seal a new partnership, calling it a golden age in their alliance. Donald Trump and Sanae Takaichi signing deals on trade, security, and key minerals to curb reliance on China. Beijing also making its own outreach, with China upgrading its free trade pact with ASEAN for a new era of cooperation covering digital, trade, and sustainable development. And HSBC raises its profitability outlook for 2025, despite a 14% drop in third quarter profit due to $1.4 billion in legal charges. Now, tight security in South Korea's Gyeongju as the ancient capital city gets ready to host this week's APEC summit. In 2 days, leaders from 21 economies, including U.S. President Donald Trump and China's President Xi Jinping, will arrive, turning the streets of the historic city into a global diplomatic stage. Now, CNA senior correspondent Lim Yun-suk joins us live from the summit's venue in Gyeongju. So, Yun-suk, how exactly is the city transforming itself to welcome all these world leaders?
Well, Gyeongju has been preparing for months to welcome leaders from around the world, hoping that the summit will put the ancient city firmly on the global stage. As expected, the security is extremely tight, and right now I am standing outside the press center where a full checkpoint is in place right now. All the reporters have to go through these baggage checks and also the ID checks before entering. And right now, there are about 3,000 local and foreign journalists who have registered to cover this event. And the main conference venue is just round the corner from where I am, and the entire area is really under heavy guard. Now, the streets and sidewalks around this area, the Pomun tourist area, right now, it's been sealed off to the public, and it seems like most of the public and public cars will not be allowed around this place. There are armored vehicles and anti-drone units that are on standby, and thousands of police are deployed across the city. And that's because a lot will be happening here over the next few days. Gyeongju, an ancient city little known outside Korea, will be bustling with high-profile visitors this week. The main spotlight will be on these two leaders, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. And their summit meeting expected to take place on October 30th. When they last met 6 years ago, Mr. Trump was serving his first term in the Oval Office. Tensions between Washington and Beijing have risen as both sides raised tariffs on each other's goods and planned curbs on the flow of vital minerals and technology products. It's hoped the high-stakes meeting could pave the way for de-escalation and put negotiations back on track. But some analysts are skeptical.
만나서 뭐 우리 같이 협력하면서 잘 살자 이런 얘기를 할 수는 있는데 그러면 이제 조금 전 세계의 어떤 불안전성 이런 것들이 좀 불확실성이 좀 줄어들고 일시적으로 할 수 있지만 미중 간의 무역 마찰이나 이 현재 관계는 이렇게 만나서 해결을 할 수 있는 상황은 이미 넘어갔다.
President Lee Jae-myung, who will be hosting his first major international event since taking office in June, will also be meeting with Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi. First, with Mr. Trump on the 29th of October. Their last meeting was in Washington in August when President Lee asked him to be the peacemaker in bringing peace to the Korean peninsula. Both sides remain deadlocked on details of South Korea's $350 billion investment pledge, which forms a key part of the trade pact. And they have yet to work out visa issues following a raid on a Hyundai LG plant in Georgia last month. On November 1st, President Lee will have his first sit-down meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
한반도 지역 내에서 안정과 평화 문제일 텐데요. 여기에서는 이제 아무래도 이재명 정부에서는 그 북한 비핵화와 관련된 문제를 강조할 것 같습니다. 근데 이와 반대로 중국 측에서는 아마 우리의 보다 주권적인 사안을 이제 언급할 것 같습니다.
Other bilateral meetings are also scheduled during APEC, but all eyes will be on whether Mr. Trump will get to shake hands with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Mr. Trump has said he is open to a meeting like the one at the demilitarized zone during his first term in office. South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun told CNA in an exclusive interview last week that Seoul supported all those meetings during APEC, saying Seoul was not worried they would overshadow its own diplomatic agenda, and that APEC had its own job to do.
We face new challenges, so maybe it's good time for us, for the APEC leaders, to mull it over and talk about the future of APEC. As a result, there will come out a Gyeongju Declaration. Statement will emphasize three things: connect, innovate, and prosper. In addition, there will be two more statements on AI and demographic change.
And when APEC is over and the leaders return home, the city of Gyeongju will be hoping that the international event will put it on the world map. And so security here has been raised to the highest level with about 19,000 police officers deployed, as there are large-scale anti-Chinese and also anti-Trump rallies expected during this week. And all of this as Gyeongju transforms into the center of global diplomacy, as it is determined to make sure that this APEC summit goes smoothly and safely.
And Yoon Suk, meantime, separately, South Korea, I believe they're also rolling out its soft power playbook. BTS's leader RM, he's reportedly set to appear at the summit events. So I'm curious to know, how is Seoul using K-pop and all these other cultural icons to charm the visiting leaders? And also, what tone is it hoping to set for the APEC gathering?
Well, that's right. You know, because beyond this heavy security and the diplomacy here, South Korea also really wants to highlight its soft power this week. And here in Gyeongju, this is the cradle of Korea's ancient culture. And so the South Korean government wants to show both the deep traditions here in Korea, but also its modern side, too. And around the main venues, the visitors here are being greeted by Koreans dressed up in Korean traditional hanbok. You see cultural performances and exhibitions celebrating Gyeongju's long history as the capital of the Shilla dynasty. But at the same time, you know, Seoul is also adding this touch where it wants to include K-pop. On Wednesday, as you said, RM, the leader of BTS, is scheduled to speak at the APEC CEO summit. And, you know, that really underlines how South Korea's pop culture and this total entertainment industry have become very important diplomatic tools for South Korea. And so South Korean government is saying that the idea is to soften the tone of what's usually a very high-stakes policy-heavy week, and to show the softer side of South Korea, not just as an economic powerhouse, but also as a country using its culture to engage the world in a more personal way.
All right, many thanks for that report. CNA senior correspondent Lim Yoon-suk battling the cold, live from Gyeongju, South Korea. Now, Donald Trump's potential talks with Kim Jong-un come as the U.S. leader met with Japanese families whose loved ones were abducted by North Korean agents decades ago. Now, during the brief meeting in Tokyo, alongside Japanese Prime Minister PM Takaichi, Mr. Trump said that he would raise the issue with Mr. Kim.
We'll be discussing it. We always have this in mind because it started with Shizo Abe, and now the Prime Minister is going to be a great Prime Minister, by the way. And it's my honor to be with you again, and we will do everything within our power.
Japan says 17 of its citizens were taken by North Korean agents in the late 1970s and 80s, alongside hundreds of unexplained cases. Pyongyang had disputed the total number taken, saying that 8 have died, while 4 never entered the country. 5 Japanese nationals were repatriated in 2002. Well, Mr. Trump renewed his commitment to secure the return of the others, saying that Washington is, quote, with them all the way. Taiwan's foreign minister Lin Jialong says that he's not worried that Donald Trump will abandon the island ahead of the U.S. president's potential meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, at the APEC summit in South Korea. Mr. Lin says ties with the U.S. remain very stable, citing Taipei's close cooperation on security, trade and business with Washington. Mr. Trump previously said that President Xi assured him there would be no invasion during his time in office. But the U.S. has yet to approve any new arms sales to Taiwan since Mr. Trump's return to the White House for his second term. Russian President Vladimir Putin has reaffirmed strategic ties with North Korea, saying that relations were progressing according to plan during talks with Pyongyang's top diplomat in Moscow yesterday. A North Korean state media, KCNA, said that Foreign Minister Cho Son-hui discussed strengthening cooperation between the two countries with Mr. Putin. The meeting comes as the boost in ties between Moscow and Pyongyang continues to draw global concern. The two nations signed a defense pact last year. North Korea has since sent thousands of its soldiers and ammunition to support Russia's war in Ukraine in return for Russian military tech support. Now, Ms. Cho also held separate talks with her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. The Russian Foreign Ministry said both sides agreed that rising tensions on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia stemmed from what they described as aggressive actions from the U.S. and its allies. Now, the Finnish Foreign Minister has accused China of facilitating Russia's war on Ukraine. Elina Valtonen was in our studio for Asia Now, where she explains how Finland has been pushing for Beijing to use its leverage with Moscow to end the war.
We do a lot of trade with China, but at the same time, we have been very vocal about that as well, that we do look actually with great sorrow at the growing relationship between Russia and China, because essentially China is facilitating Russia to wage the war against Ukraine. And it is pitiful not only for Ukraine, but it is certainly against international law, and it is an issue for the entirety of Europe. And we can't have that. So that is what we are also openly telling our Chinese counterparts, that we would wish for them to use their leverage to have Putin end its brutal and illegal war.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Malaysia wraps up the ASEAN summit in its capital with the passing of the torch of the bloc's chair to the Philippines. The ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur has wrapped up, with the Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim taking to the stage one last time in his role as the bloc's chair.
Focusing the economic fundamentals, and in terms of investment, trade and economic growth, it is one of the fastest growing economy in the world. That's why the whole world is looking at us. That's why the whole world, representing the whole continent, is here. Because of it is peaceful, it has enormous potential to propel economic growth.
The Philippines taking over as ASEAN chair after Mr. Anwar handed over the role to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. during the closing ceremony. Mr. Marcos says Manila is prepared for the task ahead.
As your chairship concludes, the Philippines is honored to take on the responsibility of leading ASEAN from 2026. We are committed to carrying forward your momentum and to implement on its first year the ASEAN Community Vision 2045 with purpose and resolve. We likewise remain dedicated to facilitating the further integration of Timor-Leste into the ASEAN family.
Her AP correspondent Maria Ronson is covering the story for CNA, and she joins us live from Metro Manila. Maria, first up, help us understand this. Let's talk through the goals that you think the Philippines will likely focus on as ASEAN chair.
Okay, so the Philippines hopes to do the following: strengthen security and stability in the region, enhance economic cooperation among member countries, broaden engagement with dialogue partners such as the US, China, Japan, India, to name a few, and focus on regional concerns such as the situation in Myanmar and the Thai-Cambodia border, determine economic uncertainties, and more importantly, ensure peace and security issues along with maritime cooperation. They have said their primary goal is to conclude an effective, legally binding code of conduct, otherwise known as COC, with China in the South China Sea, which has been on the negotiating table for more than 2 decades. But as has been widely reported, China has not accepted the arbitral findings of 2016, which has been seen by many as a triumph for the Philippines, as it invalidated the China's historic claims over the South China Sea. So expect the road to final signing of the COC on the South China Sea to be turbulent, to say the least. An easier path to navigate would be economic goals within the region. And one project being considered is an ASEAN Power Grid initiative, integrating the region's power needs. It aims to connect electricity networks of member countries, enabling cross-border power trading. The project seems to fall right into what President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has asserted will be his focus in hosting ASEAN in 2026, to be practical, inclusive, and aim for measurable initiatives. And one important goal he hopes to achieve would be the concept of ASEAN centrality. That is for ASEAN to be the main platform for dialogue. And that means regional issues are addressed within rather than being dominated by outside major powers. But with the US and China flexing their muscle in the region through various trade tariffs, economic might, and skirmishes in the South China Sea.
Now, I just want to jump in here, Maria, and just cut you off there and pick up on what you are saying, because I just really want to talk about the challenges, actually, that you think Manila will possibly face as the head of the bloc.
The challenges will be, as always, the developments in South China Sea, because South China Sea, apart from being rich in fish and natural resources, is an important trade route for everyone. So it's important that the access to these disputed waters are assured. There's also the situation in Myanmar that needs to be resolved, threats to regional peace and maritime security, and far-reaching impact of climate change and economic volatility.
All right, many thanks
Those
for
are the
your
challenges.
Got it. Thanks for your thoughts on that. AP correspondent Maria Ronson for CNA live from Metro Manila. Now, the passing of the ASEAN chairmanship baton to the Philippines from Malaysia, just one issue Arnold Gay spoke about with Melissa Goh and Leong Wai Kit in the latest episode of the CNA Correspondent Podcast.
So the chair, Wai Kit, has been handed over to the Philippines. I mean, it won't start work officially till 1st of January next year. But I'm wondering, will it inherit a bloc, an alliance, if you want to call it that, that's in a good place? Or, will Manila feel that, it's going to be a very high bar? And do you think Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is going to maintain what Anwar Ibrahim is doing? Or do you get a sense that he's going to try something else?
Well, I think the issues facing ASEAN will always be there, and these are very pressing issues which the region, which ASEAN must address, because it is for the safety and stability of everyone in the region. And ASEAN's position, regardless of what it is always consistent. It's consensus-based, it doesn't want to choose sides, and that one won't change. Of course, when we look at Malaysia's chairmanship, it is very personality-driven. I mean, who can forget the visuals of Donald Trump? You were there. And I've
the Trump dance, waving the flag.
Exactly.
He was in his element, but Malaysia certainly has set the bar very high for Philippines, the next chair, to actually, But having said that, President Trump, during his first presidency, actually, first appearance was in Manila. In 2017, attending that was the first ASEAN summit, and Malaysia is the second ASEAN summit in his second term in office. Now, whether he will return to Manila again, it remains to be seen.
I can catch the rest of that CNA Correspondent episode on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, along with YouTube. The man accused of assassinating former Japanese Prime Minister Shizo Abe has pleaded guilty as his trial begins today, 3 years after the shooting in Nara stunned the world. Tetsuya Yamagami faces charges of murder and arms control after allegedly using a homemade gun to shoot Japan's longest-serving leader during an election speech in 2022. The 45-year-old suspect is said to have held a grudge over Mr. Abe's ties to the Unification Church. Yamagami told officials that the massive donations his mother made to the church had caused his family's financial collapse. His defense will reportedly deny any political motive, while prosecutors plan to argue it was a calculated act. Now, a verdict is expected in January. If convicted, he could face a long jail term. The assassination served as a wake-up call for Japan, where gun laws are among the world's strictest. It also triggered political fallout, with 4 ministers stepping down. The Unification Church has powerful political connections around the world. It faces hundreds of lawsuits in Japan from families who say it manipulated members into draining their savings to make donations. China's hairy crab farmers are struggling to survive as climate change threatens to dry up supply. Well, unusually long summers and rising temperatures have slowed crab growth and even encouraged bacterial growth in the waters.
Xie Dandan and her family have been farming hairy crabs in eastern China for over a decade. Named after their furry claws, hairy crabs are a culinary delicacy in China. And a set of 4 can sell for hundreds of dollars when exported to Singapore or Japan. But the past 3 years have been difficult for Xie and other crab farmers, as unusually high temperatures and longer than expected summers have reduced their output. Xie said hopes of a better harvest this year were crushed after warm summer weather lasted until late October.
今年呢，在前期的时候，夏天温度还好，它没有持续性40度以上的高温，但是它秋天的时候没有降温下来，所以说这个一段时间稍微有一点影响，会导致大闸蟹它的生长周期变长，对，成熟的比较晚一点，比以前。
Cultivating hairy crabs is extremely labor-intensive. The farmers start out by growing crab larvae in ponds for about a year before they transport them to fenced farms within the lake. To get bigger, the crabs need to molt or shed their outer shells 5 times between March and September. But if the water is too warm, it can kill the crabs as they shed their shells. The National Weather Authority said this was the country's hottest summer in over 60 years. Scientists link it to climate change. Scientists also say hot weather threatens the crab's environment by reducing the amount of oxygen in the water and causing more bacteria to grow.
做农业的都是听天由命。 已经有了这种心态，任何一个不管种庄稼也好，还是去做其他的那个养殖业也好，都是这样听天由命。我们都是期望一年风调雨顺。
Xie says it will depend on whether the hairy crabs can adapt to the changing climate. And if not, then she says she worries her industry may eventually be phased out.
And that wraps up Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.